Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I am excited to have a conversation today about a topic that many men bring to me, which is about asking for what they want. And I have an amazing guest here today, Joe Bernstein. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, Shayna. I'm glad to be here.
So we're going to talk today about this whole topic of asking for what you want, and does asking for what you want make you look weak or make you seem like you don't have it all together? And, you know, a lot of men tell me that they think I need to know already. You know, I need to know what another person wants or what a woman wants. And that it's embarrassing to ask questions. So we're going to dive into what it's like to receive some of those questions and how you can ask them in a way that actually maintains a sense of your own strength and confidence and integrity.
Yeah.
And yes, as we dive in, I just want to do a quick introduction of Joe, and then we will start with our topic. So Joe Bernstein has spent the last 15 years coaching, training, developing, and empowering thousands of people. First as a sales manager for Bose Corporation, where he worked his way up to running multi-million-dollar businesses in his mid-20s. And then he created his own private coaching practice to liberate his life and live his mission of creating an empowered world of transformation through teaching, inspiring, and coaching. Through losing 150 pounds, thriving after a divorce early in life, ending a successful career, and then building his own practice, Joe has learned that we must develop who we are at the deepest levels and focus on our mindset much more than our skill set if we want long-term change and a life we love. As a private coach, he works with entrepreneurs, VP-level leaders, and regular dudes to create anything from a healthier lifestyle to greater income, doing what they love, to deeper and better relationships. Joe knows that through both personal experience and his professional work, that human beings are capable of extraordinary evolution, and he loves facilitating that growth. And I'll just add personally, I've seen you facilitate that growth and experienced, you know, my own growth facilitated by you. And I really wholeheartedly trust you. And so I'm glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful that I'm here and that I'm on this podcast. I'm really loving it, actually. I listened to it quite a bit, and what you've been bringing to men is something that I'm very grateful for too. And I think you know where I stand as far as just, I love who you are as an advocate for men in this challenging time.
Thank you. It is a challenging time. It's a very challenging time. And you know, that actually leads right into what we're talking about, right? I mean, part of the challenge actually, I think could be related, and I hadn't really thought about this before, but you know, this idea that asking, or when men have said to me, you know, I've been told by pickup artists or, you know, people out there, like, you know, dating advice, you should never ask a woman if you want to touch her or kiss her, or, you know, so you don't need to send her the whole thing around this, but it is an interesting entry point into how men can actually start to ask in a way that doesn't feel like it's collapsing or needy or, you know, just awkward.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we're thinking about the world of women, and especially when we're thinking about even just business too. Like, we're supposed to just earn our promotions and our cool projects and just be given to us, and we shouldn't have to like self-promote or ask for them. There's this theory or this myth, that this narrative that like, well, you just do all the right things and it's supposed to come to you, right? And
if you were good enough, right? Or if you
right.
were something like that.
You're good enough if you worked hard enough, if you were strong enough, if you were handsome enough, if you were fast enough, if you were the best at this and that. All naturally, by the way, because we're not allowed to like learn how to do these things. You should just be born with it.
Yep.
But I've learned that through my life, gosh, even back in coaching 20-year-olds to sell $5,000 audio equipment and working with people on all different levels, and now working with clients now at very high levels and changing their life and growth in their business. Challenging conversations are pretty much the bedrock for an extraordinary life. Asking for what we want, and also being able to confidently and clearly express our boundaries, and then navigating through what we perceive to be conflict, to me is just almost everything. Like, we can't have a great life without it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we get to have this conversation. Gosh, especially with women, how challenging is the whole concept of consent right now? Like, whoa. I was just in a room the other night with about 20 guys, probably all in their 20s and 30s, maybe some early 40s. And it was this conversation again about what's going on in the media, what's happening with celebrities, and the conversation of like consent came up, and like, how do you do this now? And like, it's just, that's a whole nother, we could probably do a whole podcast on that, but.
We could, but I'd like to take it into, some of the concerns or frustrations around asking, right? Like, you brought up a promotion, or, some men who are listening date women and some men date men. So it could be, a partner of any gender, but there is a particular thing right now with women and consent. But let's kind of dive in the place of, do you have beliefs around asking for what you want? I mean, it sounds like what you're saying, right, is what is it that you said, something about challenging conversations are the bedrock of
a great life, a great career, a great relationship. Yeah.
So how do you frame this for a man, like who comes to you and says, I have these things I want, and you say, maybe, are you asking for them? And he says, no, right? What's the conversation then you get into with him?
So how does it come up? Right. What typically comes up is if I'm talking to someone, I'll give an example with a client I have. He really had to have a challenging conversation. He's VP of finance of the software company. Apparently they just got purchased today. He messaged me. And he's worked his butt off for 2 decades. He's worked crazy hours to rise the ranks and become who he's become in his career. He's way up there. But it's at the point where that's not leading to him having a great personal life, and he's got some real health challenges. So he's working these 10 and 12-hour days. He's answering emails at midnight, and it's really getting to the point where we can't move much further in helping him with his personal life and his social life, his dating life, or in his health without something changing.
Right.
The block came up of like, well, I know what my CFO expects. She absolutely expects me to be there setting the example, in at 7, out at 8, answering her texts and answering her emails.
Yeah.
So how this one came up was, of course, I'm just like, are you sure? You've told me over and over again that you're the kind of guy who sees and structures deals in a way that no one else can. Is your value really in being the guy who's there 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day anymore?
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right? And so we had to get into that conversation. It led to a conversation where he had to go in and express, I really want to be able to leave at a normal time. And I really don't want to answer emails anymore at midnight. And I want to know that my status here is safe.
Those are very clear. I love that. A very clear sense, right? And I imagine you helped him get clear about what the values are that he's wanting, or what his desires are in that situation.
Yes, because essentially at that point for him, it's just like, there's no option here. I either find an exit strategy on this career, or I continue to sacrifice this way.
Right, which is sad to me also, that it takes sometimes getting to the point where there's no other option, where there's a health scare, where your partner's like, I'm going to leave you if you don't spend more time with me, that it's been 20 years for him.
Right. Yeah.
And how we can start to back this up to actually do it sooner.
Right. So at the end of the day, he had to have a difficult conversation where he had to ask for what he wanted, and he had to kind of like learn to negotiate the needs of the business versus his own needs.
Uh-huh.
And a big part of it was just helping him see his value.
I was
That piece
just
about,
thinking that.
well, I believe that, so like there's a lot that I can go into here. I can teach, here's a process for difficult conversations. Here's the 7 steps. I literally have 7 steps, like I can teach people. But none of it matters if we're not coming from a place of knowing our values and really knowing and owning our value.
Yes. Okay. And I would love to get into the 7 steps. And this is such a great point, right? Because if you come to this conversation asking these questions and you don't believe in yourself or you don't know your own value, it's a completely different conversation, right? It's like you're kind of asking for permission or asking without believing that that person is still going to see your contribution, or there's a whole different energy, right? Versus, hey, I know what I bring to the table here, whether it's relationship or business or any other area in life. I know what I bring to the table. Here's what I want. This feels vulnerable to ask for, perhaps, saying something about the difficulty of it. But instead of collapsing into permission asking, it actually becomes a conversation that then both people can see, well, how can we create something even more powerful here, more effective here, right? And that's not necessarily based on the spectrum or scales that we were looking at previously.
Right. And that's so important. You talked about how do we frame it. And at the end of the day, how do we frame it is, if we want to have a great life, we have to be willing to take complete responsibility and ownership over what happens in our life and the outcomes that we do or don't create. Not necessarily the results, but like the outcomes and situations we put ourselves in, because results can be tricky. Right?
Yeah, what's the difference between, you said, the outcomes and the results for you?
Yeah, so a result to me is like a very tangible thing. Like I got this promotion by January 3rd of 2019, right?
Yeah.
An outcome is like, to me, I have a better life. I have work-life balance. I love what I'm doing. Right. So that's more of like an outcome or a life circumstance. It's a slight distinction, maybe semantic.
No, but it's important, I think.
Right. But to me, it's like that ownership and the responsibility. And if we're taking ownership and responsibility, then there's really no one that can grant us permission.
Yeah.
We just have to find the way to create the situation where we can get what we want. And what you said was like a co-creative way.
Yes.
I think that's the other thing is we approach a lot of conversations as opposition.
Right.
And so we have to learn to take the mindset of like, both parties want something.
Yes.
And how do we co-create that? So I think it's a huge mindset shift from like even just asking for what I want to like, how do I create what we want? Or how do we all get our like needs met in this?
Well, that's huge, right? So double clicking on that, right? Right. When you're going in to ask for something, there is usually, I would say, maybe not always, but usually there's a benefit for the other person. I'm thinking of if it's a romantic situation or, a partnership situation, if you're asking for whether it's more touch or whether it's time away or whatever it is, likely the reason is that you want to feel more alive. You want to feel more inspired. You want to feel more connected, right? And so I like that you're bringing up this point, because if we just go in thinking, oh, I'm asking for something that I want and it's only for me and it's selfish and there's nothing here for someone else, then it can feel more daunting to ask for what we want. But when we recognize, right, someone else is going to get something out of this too, that can bring more, more ease to the conversation.
More ease, but like, let's just talk about removing barriers. Like, what's more likely for me? How's it more likely for me to get what I want? Like by expressing how it benefits someone else, or just talking about how it benefits me, and like removing like, you can't have this because I need it. But it's like, no, we create. That's one of the 3 like paradoxes that I tend to frame it into. There's this selfish/generous paradox. How can learning? Because I've done a lot with people around self-care. I started doing coaching around health and wellness, and then I kind of shifted out to more life coaching and business coaching. Yeah. So much comes down to selfish/generous paradox. To be really generous, we have to take care of ourselves.
Oh, I see what you're saying, right? So you have to take care of yourself, and in some ways that could seem selfish, but it also allows you to be more generous.
Yes, but also how's it generative for the other person? How does it create something the other person wants? I just recently did I have a small group coaching program with these all women. Actually, I usually coach men, but this one thing I do is all women.
Interesting.
And it's for women who've graduated this coaching school I went to like get their businesses rolling. And there was this woman who's really afraid of like taking too much time on her business, away from her husband, away from her teenage daughters. And it was like, well, that's selfish. Like, if this is a thing that I need for me and want for me, after, by the way, sacrificing, the last 2 decades to be the mom, right? Yeah, I know you know this one. And all my questions were like, okay, well, how does this benefit your husband, John? How does this benefit your daughter? So how does it benefit her? Yeah. Okay, great. Can you still see it as selfish? No, I really can't. Okay. So we went deeper, like, so what would this mean? How would you show up differently if you still do it? Well, I'd be this and I'd be that and I'd be passionate. I'm like, great. Is that the example you want to set for your daughters? Yes.
Powerful.
And what would it mean for your husband if you have a much more passionate like sense of being? And she was like, do we have to go there? So, but the point is, like, when we take care of ourselves, we have more to give to others.
Yes.
But also it creates more for others a lot of the time.
Yes.
It creates a structure. It creates more connection. So often what we want is more connection.
Yeah.
Especially with men and women, when it's like the guy wants his alone time or the guy wants sex, or it's like we have that narrative that the guy's always wanting this, right? The woman might want more relationship growth or more intimacy or more communication. We all want something.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how do we find out the place where it's like, well, we can both have this because I'm asking for what I want? We can create the container for us to both prioritize what we need and want. Yeah.
I love that. Right. How do we make it a win-win as opposed to, we have to be on different teams or try to get our needs met in spite of each other? How do we actually get our needs met with each other, support each other? Yeah. You mentioned 3 paradoxes. I'm curious what the other 2 are.
Strength and vulnerability. Mm-hmm. A lot of men see being vulnerable as weakness. I mean, at the end of the day, if we look at the roots of the word and the language, like, what does it mean? It means we're open to injury, essentially. Mm-hmm. And the reality in my world, what I've discovered with myself in my life and with my clients, and even back in my sales days, like the ability to show our strength and our, just like our presence. We're present, we're unwavering, like we're firm, but then also be able to show and model and lead into vulnerability.
Yes.
To me, I've been for years, before I was coaching, I had this formula, strength plus vulnerability equals power.
Yeah.
And I think they have to come together. But a lot of guys are creating this distance between the two, or this opposition between the two.
Right.
To ask for what I want is vulnerable.
Yeah.
I have clients that really don't even want to admit to me or themselves that they have needs.
Oh, yeah.
You've probably experienced this.
I've worked a lot with that with men. It's like, right, to have needs in itself seems like it's weak or, not enough. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, there's a strength in recognizing vulnerability. There's a strength in recognizing that something, feels like it's missing or we want something.
Yeah. And there's a power that comes with knowing we need other people.
Yes.
We need other people to create a great life. We cannot operate in a silo.
Yeah.
We can do that. We can probably achieve pretty high levels of success, but then we're pretty lonely and unhappy anyway. So why bother?
Right.
So there's that embracing vulnerability and strength are coupled. They're not separate. Mm-hmm. They're not outside of each other. The other is, this is a hard one. I need to redo the language on this, but it's like not entitled versus like worthy or deserving.
Huh.
So this one I have to explain more.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to come to our asks, our negotiations, whatever you want to call it, our difficult conversations, believing we're worthy and deserving of what we want, but not
entitled. Right.
So it's that paradox of like, no, I deserve it. I deserve to have this great life. I deserve to have this type of level of connection or sexuality in my relationship or this raise. But I deserve it as a core being. I deserve it because of who I am, and I will work for it. I will do what I need to create it. I'm not
entitled to just have it handed to me. And it may be with you, whoever I'm having this conversation with, and it may not be, right? I don't get to take it or, just grab for it here. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that I should stuff that desire or that sense that I get to have actually what I want and need.
Exactly. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's a whole nother, that's a whole nother ball of wax to go into, is believing that we can that we're resourceful enough to get what we need in other ways or outside of this one particular situation or relationship. Like
Yeah.
that core belief, like I can create a great life. I can go out and get the income. I can be fulfilled sensually, sexually, whatever, even if it doesn't happen here.
Right.
Now we're moving into like just a way of being. We just have to believe that we can get what we need, or else asking becomes this really scary endeavor.
Yes. Right. And if there's that scarcity of, well, if this is the only job or the only relationship, and if I leave these things, I don't know, or I don't trust that something else is going to come along, then it can keep us in that box of, well, I shouldn't rock the boat. I shouldn't ask for what I want or need here. And then we kind of stay at that plateau or kind of stasis that starts to feel dull and uninspiring. And yeah,
which leads a lot of people, I'll say men because we're talking about men, but a lot of people to, or men, to like the hinting and hoping. Right? Like the trying to be the good boy and do just the right thing to get what I want, the covert contracts, the subtle manipulation, which doesn't feel good to anyone and rarely gets us what we want. And when we do get a version of what we want, it's like table scraps version.
Say more about that.
I had a PhD in taking table scraps. Like,
table scraps, you said.
Table scraps, yeah, like scraps, like not the full expression of what we want, not what we really want, right? And I come from this perspective because I did spend 30 years not believing I deserved great income or a great career or a great partner. In fact, I didn't even think I deserved a partner, right? So when I had partners, it was toxic and codependent and just full of drama and not fulfilling.
Yeah.
I grew up thinking that like, well, with the body I had, being over 300 pounds, often in my teen years and well over 300 pounds in my 20s, like, oh, this is not what's considered attractive or sexy in any way. The value that I have is very limited. So like, I certainly didn't think that I deserved or needed much or could get much when it comes to sexuality, right? Which like then as you develop, changes what you believe that you need, and we can learn to operate within, and then we learn to just take what's coming to us. So that's what I mean by like the table scraps thing is I definitely lived a life where I knew what it felt like to be really happy for just like the bare minimum.
Right.
And now and kind of the opposite, like I want everything, and I'll create it.
Well, yeah. And it just has me think, right, when you're out there settling or thinking that the bare minimum is actually what you want because you're conditioned to think it's not okay to ask for more, then how do we ever get what we want, right? So oftentimes when I'm working with men, I have to do some digging to get into what are their actual desires, right? And if you believed you could have more, then what would you want? Or if you could have it any way, what would your life look like? What would your love life look like? What would your sex life look like? And not to say that we necessarily just, again, like you said, we're entitled or we get to have it all or instantly. But if we're not using that as the bar,
right,
and we're cutting off any, potential of getting even close to that.
Yep, absolutely. And that's that goes back a little bit to the idea of like outcomes rather than results, like not being too fixated on like, I need to have exactly that, but knowing that I create. Yeah. Gosh, there's so much to talk about here.
I know. And I was just thinking, what do you think about talking about, you said you had 7 steps. Was it for a challenging conversation?
This could be for, I'll go into that. And
let's just see, maybe we kind of do the highlight version and maybe we'll do another whole, deep dive into it, but especially around the topic of asking for what you want, highlight those parts.
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't universal, and I don't imagine that every step is needed all the time, but a framework that I've come up with, especially for clients in like business, and it still relates though, is this framework of difficult conversations, asking for what you want, setting a boundary, giving feedback, etc., or like a negotiation is, come up with that creative or positive framing, right? So like do the work first to understand how what you want
benefits
is actually going to benefit the other person. Yes. That's the first place.
Great.
And then of course, set up the conversation, ask for the time. Next step is like naming and owning your experience. this takes a lot of skill development. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot of work on like probably emotional awareness.
Yeah.
But let's say you have the ability to create clear I statements, right? Or you have the ability to really speak about your emotion. You name and own your experience. So we both know this is like, we're not blaming or shaming the other person.
Uh-huh. So for your client who in the beginning, it would be like, I,
Right.
I'm having health problems and I've been working really long hours. I'm not getting enough sleep. And, this is what's happening for me in my life.
Right. Or with him.
Versus you make me,
right.
You're making me be here, or some kind of blaming, attacking.
We can take it further. With him, we talked about how he needed to make sure that he communicated, I've set up the expectation for myself that I work this way. I don't know if you've ever told me I had to.
Interesting.
But I've believed that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I like, totally owning it. And it really is kind of scaring me, because you ask me, this is his actual situation. Yeah. You've asked me multiple times, what can you do, or what can the company do to help me get healthy? But I'm afraid to ask for what I really need.
Interesting.
Right. So like helping him work through that, like the naming and owning your experience. We have to be able to break into our deeper values. I kind of want to say like slice deeper, or own your truth even deeper. So I think it's really powerful to be able to say, and I want this because I really value being alert and focused and productive at work. And the way I'm doing things now, I'm not. Mm-hmm. And I really value having a wonderful life and a social life, and I haven't created one now.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that I'm bringing my full self to work and not having, resentment or whatever. I value this, good communication between us, our teamwork. I value my leadership, and I notice it affecting the way I lead my team. It's like really, and again, this takes digging in. Like, I ask people, who here knows your core value? Like, who knows your company's core values? And people are like, yeah, I kind of know them. And if I did this at a presentation last week, it was like 100 people. I'm like, who knows your company's core values? Like half the people raise their hand. Like, who knows your personal, not influenced by your company, your 4, 5, or 6 core values?
Core values.
One guy raised his hand. He was a friend of mine. He's also a coach. Yeah. But like, who happened to be in the audience because I invited him for support. I asked for what I wanted, So that's some work we need to do first. But I think that if you can state your value, well, here's the value at play here. Again, it's not about the other person at that point.
Yes. Okay, good. So I just want to, again, highlight that piece that I just think someone could listen to this again and again and again. A man could listen to this and really, there's a lot you just said in step number 2, and one of them to actually know your own values and then how they stack up against, or I don't want to say stack up against, actually, how they are aligned or not aligned with the people and situations and, everything that you're doing in your life.
Right. Right. And I have this great background in sales and communication and in leadership of people. I think sales is leadership when done from the heart anyway.
Yes.
But that's led me to understand that like, it's not manipulation when you can see how there's value for someone that they don't see.
Right.
And you can present it. It's a gift.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in here. I mean, we're talking about emotional competence. We're talking about learning to use I statements. We're learning about how to like reframe things positively.
Mm-hmm. How to find that deeper cut.
Understanding our values and being able to communicate them.
Yep.
So this is typically not like someone wouldn't call me and I'd go, here's your process.
Right. Here's an hour. We're going to figure this out.
We've done some work, or they've done a lot of work to come to this point where they can already do this. The next part is like what I call enrolling the other person. This is where it gets co-creative. This is the simplest step. Are you willing to help me create a solution that works for both of us? Like just
simple as that.
And maybe they're not willing.
Yeah.
I could see a relationship where like they're just totally at odds and they've been trying to figure things out. And in that time, in that space within the relationship, one party's like not willing. Like, I'm just not willing to do this right now.
But then you're clear, right? And the willingness, there is a vulnerability in asking, are you willing, versus attempting to demand, right? You're much more open to rejection and open to that, having to see that someone actually doesn't want to support you. Right. But what I've also seen in relationships and, whether it's business or romantic, that the willingness to, or the vulnerability of asking, are you willing, can actually create a huge shift in the person receiving, such that they feel their own vulnerability, right? Or they feel their own connection to you. Oh,
Right.
am I willing versus he's not, demanding or attacking me.
Yeah. So I love that part.
It's
the easiest part, but the hardest too, because it is deeply vulnerable.
Yeah.
Finally, I mean, it's like, well, now at this point, you've been talking for 3 or 4 minutes probably. So if they said they're willing, then absolutely at this point, it's to move into a place where you become curious about their experience.
So is that the next step? Step 4 is actually to get curious.
Yeah, I consider it step 5, right? But it's their story. Get their story.
Mm.
How are you experiencing this? What's been going on for you? I love to admit my ignorance, right? Like I try and teach people this all the time. You don't know everything. And the moment you think you know everything is when you're betraying yourself kind of in a way.
Yes.
And leading yourself down a hard path in connection and communication. So I love to share, like, there's stuff I'm missing here. I'm not seeing the full picture. And I love this joke, and I say it a lot and I teach it, like, I've been working really hard, but I don't read minds yet. Right? Like, so add some levity if you can, right? And just say, like, I want to know what you're experiencing. Tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what I don't see here. I'm open. And so that is a lot. That's ego work. Like, we got to get
a lot of humility.
Yeah, we got to get some ego work to, like, put aside the idea that we should know everything or that we see everything. And we have to trust that everyone has their own experience. There's 7 billion people having their own experience
Right
now. And the idea that I see reality is, it's so adorable and cute, but it's just not. Like, we all see our own reality. So if I can come to that place where I want to know what's the other person's reality, I can't imagine there being much further conflict. There might be places that are not aligned going forward. Mm-hmm. But that sets up a lot.
Right. But when you actually want to know someone else's reality, instead of, again, trying to force or demand something to change, I see that so much with men who come to me and say, my relationship feels like it's dying. The passion has faded. And when I ask them, do you have a sense of what your partner's wanting? Right? Have you gotten curious with her or him to say, honey, I'm feeling this fading, and, I'd like to share what I want, but I'm really curious what you want and what would have you feel good here and feel more connected. And, so much of the time it's like, they say, no, I have not done that. That feels terrifying, or that feels so vulnerable. It's easier in a way to stay in that stagnant and unsatisfied place than it is to risk asking sometimes.
Right. Oh, wow. I was listening to your interview, I think with Karen Brody recently, where this came up.
Sexless relationships.
Yeah, where it's like guys often will go years without the sex they want because they're simply just afraid to find out if she's satisfied. They don't want to know. Right? So, like, it's this hugely vulnerable thing. Again, it's pretty vulnerable to say, what's your story? Like, what don't I know?
Right.
And there's got to be a lot of trust, obviously, already. To get the full story. And I don't know if we'll ever get the full story, but, like, at least point is, I have a direction I want to go. If the person thinks they're not heard, right, there's no way I'm going to be able to co-create something with them.
Yeah. So
we have to find, and we learn, like, if you're really into understanding and growing, then you learn so much in those moments.
Yes. Right. And you don't hold the perspective that because you're learning or growing, you're flawed. Or, like you said in the beginning, like that we're just supposed to know all these things. I mean, it's ridiculous how little education we get about communication and emotions and relationships and being human. And then we're just supposed to know and figure it out.
Yep. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got 2 more steps.
Yeah. So we have 2 more. One is then, like, ask for suggestions. As simple as that is. Like, what are you hearing? What's coming up for you? Right. Like, I want this. Right? You've expressed that.
Like, what do you think we should do? What do you think? How can we co-create this?
Yeah. I love to just, let's put the ball in someone else's court. I want something. I've expressed it. Right. At some point, we literally have to say, like, I've been wanting this and I haven't experienced it. I haven't put myself in the position, or I'm just not getting it. So here's what I want. I'll probably come in, like, the name and own your experience part in step 2. And then finally, like, toss the ball to them. Let them come up with an idea. Yeah. Gosh, what if they came up with something that was even more than you would have asked?
Right, that you wouldn't have even thought of.
Right. So which is really possible. And so co-create, and then this may or may not be valid. It depends on the situation, but especially when it comes to, like, that can always be valid in business, but also in relationship. Is like there's an agreement then that can be made.
So this is the last step to actually make an agreement?
The last step would be to make an agreement, and maybe it's like, hey, let's try for the next 2 weeks. Let's say it's like a sex thing. We don't want to say like, let's just try. Let's finally try the scheduling of sex, or let's finally try this. Or if it's in business, okay, well, let's agree now. The new deadline for when proposals come into my email box is 1 p.m. Friday instead of 3 p.m. Right. Can we both agree to that? What does it need to be? I don't know.
Right. For the next 2 weeks, I'm not going to answer emails after 8:00 p.m. I'm going to go home and actually take care of myself. And let's try it. And I really like that part about, okay, let's create an agreement and then let's have it that we can reassess in a certain time frame to see, is this working? And it's not, let's try this for a year. It's, well, let's try this for a couple of days, or let's try this for a week. And if it's not working, then we get to change it. And then that person also gets to feel more in control, right? Or less like they're being, dragged around, but, oh, we're co-creating this together and we're both willing and wanting to make this work for each other.
Yes, absolutely. And it's less ambiguous, right? It's less like, I love also the time container, I think is cool.
I do too. I think it's
may or may not need that, but the time container is cool to be like, let's try it for this period of time and then come back to it.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you may or may not need it. I highly suggest it.
You highly suggest it.
I do.
I make that mistake a lot. I make that mistake in my personal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have a conversation and I'll ask her something but we don't like make it clear at the end, like, okay, how long till we come back to this conversation?
Right. And then it starts to feel awkward. Like, well, I don't know if I should bring that up again.
Right.
I already asked for it once. Now I'm going to feel like I'm demanding or nagging right. Whereas if there is a clear agreement, it's like, we're going to talk about this in 2 weeks from now, then there's none of that.
Mm-hmm. Or the agreement could just be like, we're going to continue talking about this. If you have a question, bring it up. If I have something I want that's not happening, we're going to bring it up. Like, let's agree to actively be working on this. And I think of that especially in romantic relationship.
Yes.
So that way, 2 hours later or next Tuesday when it comes up, it's expected. And more than
I was just thinking about this, and we had talked about, we agreed to bring it to each other if we had something else. And I was thinking about this, and then, so there's a power in setting up that agreement or that context for yourself. And I think it's a great thing to really look at, what do I think is going to keep me from continuing to have these conversations or get what I want, and then create agreements that make it easier, for you to bring that to someone else.
Right. I hadn't even thought about that, but I guess that happens a lot with my clients. They'll say, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. What obstacles might get in the way, right? Like, now that we're aware of them, what agreement can you make with yourself or with me of what you can do when they come up?
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen when they come up? Like, how do we expect them? Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So that's a process, but really it just takes a lot. It takes a lot of boldness and authenticity and vulnerability and knowing our values and our value and our self-worth. And I think a lot of this is just leadership skills at the end of the day.
Being a leader in all areas of your life.
Right.
I love it. We could continue for decades, it feels like. And I love what you've brought. And for any man who's listening and has gotten this far, I recommend listening again, because this was packed with really, really powerful perspectives and, actionable steps. How can men find more of you?
Cool. You can check me out at joebernsteincoaching.com.
Awesome.
If you really loved something you heard today and you're serious about doing some work to create some change in your life, some different outcomes in your career or your health, you can certainly email me at joe@dropthearmor.com.
Great.
But I'm on I'm on the social media, most of that stuff. So you can find me there too.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, this was great. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.